Hello again for my chat number 3 today. Yeah, number 3. Sandra Pollock, I am the founder of the Women's Awards, and today, to celebrate International Women's Day, I've invited a few of my friends to come and talk to me about what does International Day mean to you. So you can see I have a guest, and I will introduce him in a moment. But one of the things I wanted to say was, there are many conversations that need to be had around this topic of gender equality. And International Women's Day is to highlight the imbalance in gender. There is not quite the equality that we want to see and we want to experience. So we're never going to get around to discussing all of the elements of gender equality today. This is why the Women's Awards, we continue to celebrate women throughout the year. It's not just one day that we focus on it. But thank you so much for joining us in these discussions. And if you've got any points that you want to make and that sort of stuff, then please do where you can. I think definitely on Facebook you can, and on the YouTube, you can put your comments into the box, and I can see a thumbs up somewhere for someone. Unfortunately, it doesn't always allow me to see the comments immediately, but thank you for that like. I appreciate that. So my guest this afternoon is Clive D. Fraser, who is a professor of economics at the University of Leicester. Should I call you Clive or should I call you Professor Fraser? Which would you prefer?
Clive is fine by me.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And we've met over the years off and on through my various other lives in terms of things that I do. I think we met I think the last time we definitely talked was when I was doing a show on BBC Radio Leicester, wasn't it? Yes.
That's right. Yes.
And, yeah. So it's great to keep in contact as we have done, and good to talk to you today. So the big question, well, I want to give you the opportunity just to share a little bit about what you do. What does it mean to be the Professor for Economics at the University of Leicester? What does that entail?
Well, ultimately, I want to try to inculcate some understanding of the economic environment in which we all operate to students, but in a systematic way so that they can go out into the real world and make things better economically for employers or their customers, as the case may be.
Yeah, wonderful. And how long have you been doing that? Getting some reverb here.
Well, essentially, I've been an academic since day one, because I started after 3 years as a graduate student at Southampton University. I got my first job even before finishing my PhD. My first job at the University of York, and I then went to University of Warwick for 15 years. And for the past 26 years nearly, I've been a professor at the University of Leicester. So
wow.
I've never left academia.
Okay. So can I just ask you to turn your volume down just a little? I think I'm getting some reverb. I'm hearing myself. You're fine, but I'm hearing my voice bounce back just a little bit when I speak. So hopefully you still want to be able to hear me, but okay.
So how is that? How is that?
Well, yeah, I can. It is better. If it happens again, I'll let you know. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
So we're talking about International Women's Day. So Clive, what does it mean to you? What does International Women's Day mean to you?
Well, ultimately, I think it gives us an opportunity to affirm the contributions that women are making in all aspects of life. And also, I think it provides us with an opportunity to set the record straight because women uh, haven't just been contributing recently, they've been contributing all along.
Mm.
And their contributions, unfortunately, haven't always been brought to the fore, haven't always had the publicity that they should have. And
Mm.
if I could give one example of how that has impacted on our understanding, one of the things that I go to on LinkedIn all the time is something called the Women's Lead. And this always highlights the wonderful things women are doing. But I guess in preparation for International Women's Day, it was looking at the contributions that women made to the history of the development of vaccines.
Mm.
And one person that was highlighted was someone by the name of Isabel Morgan. And it turned out that she did some critical work in the development of the polio vaccine, the introduction of dead polio into the vaccine development process, well before a male person did, who the male person, however, was subsequently the one who was most fated for that innovation.
Mm.
But the most striking thing about Isabel Morgan was she was doing this path breaking work at Johns Hopkins University in the States, one of the real top institutions. And then she got married and she gave it up. She was dragged away somewhere else to follow her husband. And she sort of vanished temporarily, at least, from the pages of history. And
Mm.
that is just one example, and I could give many others. And I think International Women's Day is an opportunity really to highlight people like that, whose contributions are relatively unsung.
Yes, that is a wonderful. Yeah, I'm still getting that feedback, just a bit there, Clive. So
Uh,
that's a wonderful example because so much work has been done by women, but as you say, they've not, that recognition has not been given. And in the days when women had to stop and, stop working, stay home and look after the family or follow their husband, their career was consistently interrupted. So what a great example. So what about your life? How many women do you have in your life in terms of family? And that's
well, I can assure you there are only three important women in my life, really important women in my life now. My partner, stroke wife, and two daughters. I have two adult daughters. I have three children, but two adult daughters. Um, and they are both full time workers. Um, they are both working in finance related activities, although I'm sure they would not um, concede in any way that my background as an economist influenced them in what they went in to do. But there we are. Um, so
so
those.
when they were yeah, still getting a feedback there. When they were growing up, did you think about wanting them to be, anything in particular, or, maybe go into this sort of female idea of a job, or, what were your views as a father, as a parent?
Well, I I wanted them to have the best education possible. That was first and foremost, not just me, my wife and I wanted them to have the best education possible because we um, are from working class backgrounds, or parents were working class. Um, nevertheless, we are both academics, and we saw that education could provide us with a ladder up. And so we wanted to maintain the same advantages, privileges, if you like, for our children, our daughters, and for our son. We, I would say, we weren't so bothered ultimately about what they went into, what career paths they adopted. I guess I stress the importance of some familiarity with STEM subjects to all the kids. But beyond that, we weren't fussed. But education, being generally well educated, we perceived as being important.
Yes, and it has worked out for them.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
so let's look at economics. What have you seen over your 26 plus years in terms of the economic contribution that you've seen across the board or impact for not necessarily only for women, but just generally? Are there any insights that you can share with us that you've seen?
Well, if we talk about women in economics as a discipline, as a subject, um, I would have to say that is still a relatively sorry tale, because we are struggling as a discipline to get more, and what I would say, enough women through the doors. I think if you're looking at the contribution of women in the economy more broadly, then of course women are playing a vital and increasingly important role. And I think this is because women are now exercising their voice more and are putting pressure to have fair representation in business, on boards, in the senior decision making occupations or strata within the society. And this is so in universities, and this is so outside. We still have far too few female vice chancellors, but the proportion of vice chancellors who are women is increasing. We have still far too few women directors, either executive or non-executive directors, in the top 350 companies in the Financial Times Stock Exchange groups. But we are having more women, and long may that continue. Of course, that said, COVID-19 has affected quite a big setback for women. And I've looked at some recent studies, for example, by PwC. They had a study quite recently, women in work, and they calculated that just a year or so of COVID will probably have put women's advance back by a decade. Um, so the progress, to some extent, that women have made economically still looks relatively fragile. And one of the reasons for that is where women are located in terms of the labor market. Predominantly, they are in client facing roles, which have been the ones which haven't offered the scope for working from home that others have, that are mainly populated by men. So, um, working in entertainment, working in recreation, working in hotels, etc. Those have been very badly impacted, and still women do predominate in those occupations.
Mm.
So it's there have been good and bad things in terms of the progress of women over the past decade, and sadly, as a consequence of the hit that COVID has inflicted on the economy, but particularly women as a group.
Yeah, yeah, that's not a great not a great view, really. It's almost we have now to double up the work that we've been doing to make up ground. And if it's, if it's going to take a decade, then we really have to pull out the stops to ensure that it happens sooner. Um, I wouldn't, I was thinking about, whether to ask you the question of, what would you suggest that business and organizations do to help speed up that turnaround? And I don't want to put you on the spot for that question, because your role is to analyze, the economy and the data and that sort of stuff. I'm not sure if in that you come up maybe with some solutions or not. So that's an open question. You don't have to feel to answer it if it's not possible.
Well, that question obviously doesn't have a very easy answer. But what I think needs to continue to happen, but at an accelerated pace, is for businesses to continue what they were doing, say from 2010 to 2019. In fact, even before that, we I think if you get the female perspective at the decision making level, you will actually inspire more women to consider um, a, a greater diversity of occupations being open to them. And ultimately, if you want to ensure women against the vagaries of the business cycle, or at least to put them on a par with men, you ultimately need to have women being located in the same diversity of occupations as men are. I don't think you could get away from that. Once you have parity in terms of representation in occupations, you will get the same sort of profile across the business cycle for men and for women. And that I think is the best you can aspire to. And actually, um, one of my roles in the business school currently is as the so-called diversity champion. And one of the activities which I'm engaged in with some of my colleagues, are things to draw more women into economics, because we know that economics is a high paying area of the economy to work in. If you're an economist, almost certainly you're going to end up as being highly paid. Um, but also contiguous things. They don't need to be pure economists at the end of the day. They will find opportunities in various branches of civil service. They can go into intellectual property in the law, etc. So if we do things like that, I believe we can make the situation better for women, and that hopefully will be repeated across the board in other disciplines in the university. And also, if I may make one other point on this, we don't just want to draw in women into these high paying professions. We also want to ensure that we draw in ethnic minorities. So not just women, but women who are ethnic minorities, because again, if you look at where they are located, typically in the profile of professions, ethnic minority women sadly are right at the bottom end in terms of remuneration, etc. So that's another thing that we're trying to address.
Yeah, some really good tips there in terms of what businesses can do, and also what women can look at and girls coming up can look at in terms of career prospects, and maybe even women shifting their career and their jobs and that sort of stuff to align with better paid roles. But businesses need to open doors, and I guess you mentioned that more women are impacting the economy through starting their own businesses. Well, this is probably one of the reasons why, certainly one of the reasons I started my own business. We could talk about this for a long time. So, but I really enjoyed hearing your input and your ideas as well. And thank you, Clive.
Nice to talk to you
For
too.
joining. Yeah, good to talk to you today. And just before we go, just a reminder for everybody that nominations for the Women's Awards are open, and you can go online. Just go to www.thewomens'awards.com, and you can find out what's happening in terms with nominations this year, and nominate. That's what I have to say. Okay, so until my next guest joins me at 3:15 today, thank you for joining me. It's been really good speaking with Professor Fraser, Professor of Economics at the University of Leicester, where I did my MA, I should say. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And no doubt we will see each other again, Professor. Thank you very much. Okay, take care.
Thank you. Bye.